Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I came home to the smell of Bath & Body Works candles still burning in the kitchen and a message that started with the words, "We're not teenagers anymore." It wasn't a breakup note, not exactly. Just a statement left open, like an unfinished blueprint. My name's Ethan Cole, 41, architect in Boston. I design things meant to last. Buildings, bridges, plans. But that night, I stood in the middle of our living room and realized I'd built my life on something temporary. My wife, Claire, had been a literature teacher for almost 15 years. She used to quote lines from novels when she was nervous. Lately, she quoted fitness podcasts. I should have seen it coming. The new Lululemon leggings, the early morning classes at that downtown gym. The way her phone started lighting up with Spotify playlists full of upbeat remixes instead of quiet piano pieces. It started small. We grabbed coffee after class, nothing serious. Then it became, he's just helping me with my form. The trainer, Ryan, mid-30s, tattoo on his forearm, the kind of guy who laughs too easily. She said he made her feel seen. I didn't ask what that meant. I just nodded, pretending it didn't feel like someone had stolen my password to the life I built. The night I found the message, she was still out. I opened the fridge and saw 2 iced coffees from Dunkin', hers half empty, lipstick on the rim. The silence was thick, almost deliberate. I sat at the kitchen island where we used to plan weekend trips, ran my hand over the marble counter she'd chosen, and thought about how love sometimes fades like blueprints exposed to too much light. Not torn, just erased over time. When she came home, I didn't shout or ask questions. I just said, "You left the candles burning." She shrugged, said something about forgetting. I watched her move around the house like a guest. Later that night, she crawled into bed without touching me. I stared at the ceiling and realized I wasn't angry. Just done. The next morning, I left early, before she woke up. Drove my Tesla Model 3 through the quiet streets. Stopped by Dunkin' again, ordered black coffee. Same routine. Different man. That was the moment it started. Not revenge, not rage. Just silence. The kind that rebuilds you from the inside out. The next morning, Claire texted me a photo from the gym. Something casual, her reflection in the mirror, a half smile, captioned, "Trying to stay consistent." I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because she looked like a stranger trying to convince herself she wasn't disappearing. That's when I realized this wasn't about another man. It was about her trying to escape her own reflection. At work, I buried myself in blueprints. Lines, numbers, precision, things that didn't lie. My assistant, Rachel, asked if everything was fine. I said yes. It was easier to redraw walls on paper than to admit the ones at home were cracking. By lunch, I found myself walking to Whole Foods, the same place Claire and I used to go every Saturday. I stood by the self-serve salad bar, watching couples argue softly about dressing choices, and wondered when we'd stopped being one of them. That evening, she came home late again, smelling faintly of citrus lotion and exhaustion. She said Ryan had stayed after class to talk about personal goals. I didn't ask what kind. She talked while scrolling through her phone, her voice drifting like background noise. Somewhere between her words, I heard what she wasn't saying. She missed being wanted. Not loved, not needed, wanted. I spent the night on the couch, pretending to fall asleep watching the news. When she finally came over, she didn't apologize or explain. She just placed her hand on my shoulder, light and detached, then walked upstairs. The sound of her footsteps faded like a metronome slowing down. The next day, I started running. No grand decision, no symbolic meaning, just movement. I put on an old pair of sneakers, cued a Spotify playlist called Focus, and ran until my lungs burned. It wasn't about chasing anything. It was about proving I could still move forward. When I came home, she was already gone. The candles were cold. Her gym bag leaned against the wall. I picked it up and noticed a folded paper in the side pocket, her class schedule, circled dates, and Ryan's handwriting in the corner. "You're stronger than you think." Maybe she was. Maybe we both were, just in different directions. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to outgrow her. A week later, the silence between us became its own language. She'd come home from the gym glowing with the kind of energy that used to belong to us. I'd be at my desk sketching designs for a coastal renovation project, pretending not to notice. Our conversations turned into transactions, bills, groceries, reminders. Even the way she said my name sounded like a habit she hadn't yet broken. One night, she mentioned she was going to a weekend workshop. Team training, she called it, a chance to grow. I nodded, said it sounded great. She waited for me to ask more, to object, but I didn't. The truth was, I didn't need to know the details. People reveal everything when they think you're not paying attention. That Saturday morning, I drove to Dunkin' for my usual coffee and sat in the parking lot, watching the sunrise smear color across the sky. For years, I'd built my life around stability. Now, I was learning to sit in the unknown, to let discomfort stretch instead of snapping back. When I got home, her car was gone. The house felt bigger, but not emptier. I walked through each room like I was seeing it for the first time. The candle wax on the counter. The yoga mat still drying near the balcony. A Lululemon bag crumpled on the floor, receipt inside. Ryan's name again, this time scrawled next to a smoothie order. It wasn't the proof that hurt. It was how ordinary it all felt, how routine betrayal can become when it hides behind self-improvement. That night, I opened my laptop and started something new. A proposal for an urban housing project I'd been too hesitant to pitch. It was ambitious, almost reckless, but it felt alive, something that wasn't shrinking. For the first time in months, I lost track of time. When Claire came home Sunday night, she looked surprised to see the lights still on. She asked if I'd eaten. I said I had. She smiled faintly, said she was tired, and went to bed without another word. I saved the file and turned off the lights. Maybe she was tired. Maybe I was just done pretending rest would fix what was already dead. By early March, I'd stopped waiting for her to notice me pulling away. The distance wasn't punishment, it was preservation. I still made coffee every morning, but only 1 cup now. Hers stayed clean in the cabinet, the mug she'd once grabbed without thinking. At work, people started saying I looked different. Lighter somehow. I'd begun running longer distances before sunrise, my Spotify playlist syncing perfectly with my breathing. Routine became recovery. Claire, on the other hand, became a collection of contradictions. She dressed sharper, smiled brighter, and spoke faster, like she was auditioning for a younger version of herself. Sometimes she'd come home humming pop songs she used to mock, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. I didn't ask. I'd already built the silence between us strong enough to hold truth without words. One Thursday night, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone. She looked up briefly, said she was thinking of switching gyms. New environment, she added, fresh start. Her voice was too casual, like she was testing the line between confession and justification. I nodded and said I hoped it helped. That was all. She hesitated, maybe expecting jealousy, maybe craving it. But I had none left to give. The next morning, she texted me a photo of a beach sunrise, not our city. I knew she'd taken a day off work without mentioning it. Later that evening, she came home late, her smile dimmer, her silence heavier. Something in her eyes said it hadn't gone the way she'd imagined. Whatever fantasy she'd been chasing had turned real enough to hurt. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood I wasn't part of her story anymore. She was chasing proof she still mattered, and I was learning how to live without needing that proof. 2 weeks later, the firm approved my proposal. The project that once felt impossible was now green-lit, funded, and mine. When I told Claire, she smiled politely, congratulated me, then went back to her phone. I didn't mind. She was drifting toward mirrors. I was moving toward light. Spring came early that year, the kind that tricks you into thinking things can still bloom after winter. I'd started running along the Charles River before work, headphones in, Spotify guiding me through miles of thought I didn't know I still had. Claire's side of the bed stayed untouched most mornings. Sometimes she'd claim early classes, sometimes grading papers. I never asked which version of the lie was true. The architecture firm had just landed a new downtown contract, and my name was at the top of the design board. It was the biggest project of my career, a modern housing complex built around light and silence. 2 things I was finally beginning to understand. My days were full now, measured, deliberate. Work, run, coffee at Dunkin', repeat. One afternoon, I stopped by Whole Foods for dinner. That place still carried a ghost of us. Her laughter in the aisles, the way she'd sneak chocolate into the cart when she thought I wasn't looking. This time, I saw her first. She was at the end of the produce section, standing too close to someone who wasn't me. Ryan, the gym trainer. They looked ordinary, like coworkers discussing lunch plans. But I knew that tilt of her head, that careful, almost performative smile. She was being seen again. She didn't notice me. Or maybe she did and chose not to. Either way, I didn't stop. I paid for my groceries and left, calm, detached, like walking out of a house already on fire. That night, I made dinner for one and opened my laptop to finalize plans for the new project. I worked until midnight, the hum of my Tesla charging outside filling the silence she'd left. The next morning, she asked if something was wrong. I said no. She frowned, almost disappointed. That's when I realized she wanted a reaction. Conflict meant connection, even if it was toxic. But quiet? Quiet meant freedom. By June, I'd stopped tracking her schedule. She still texted from the gym sometimes, still came home smelling like citrus lotion and borrowed attention. But I'd already started drafting my exit, one that didn't require doors slamming or words raised. Just movement, quiet and clean. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. It began with smaller absences, her laughter fading from the house, her perfume replaced by the sterile scent of protein shakes and Bath and Body Works candles burned down to wax. I didn't delete her number, didn't throw out her things. I simply stopped waiting for them to mean anything. I started working late, not because I had to, but because the silence of the office felt cleaner than the silence at home. My designs evolved, sharper lines, more light, more intention. The team noticed. You seem different, they said. I was. The version of me that needed approval, that waited for reassurance, had been quietly demolished. One Friday night, she called to say she'd be home late. I said nothing. Around 11, headlights swept across the living room window, and she came in wearing her workout clothes. She looked at me, expecting something, jealousy, suspicion, maybe even hope. Instead, I asked if she'd eaten. She said no. I nodded, finished my notes, and went upstairs. The next morning, I drove out of the city to a construction site. Standing in the skeleton of what would soon be a building, I felt something shift again. This was creation, not reaction. Foundations that held weight. Walls that didn't crumble under pressure. I stayed until sunset, sketching by hand, something I hadn't done in years. When I got home, Claire was in the kitchen, scrolling her phone. She said Ryan had taken a job offer in another state. She said it like a test, waiting to see if it hurt. It didn't. I congratulated her on the career growth, in a tone too even to provoke anything. She stared at me for a long time, then said quietly that we'd grown distant. I told her distance doesn't grow, it's built, and we'd both been architects of it. That night, she slept facing the wall. I slept facing peace. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee, and watched the sunrise alone. No anger, no ache, just quiet. The kind that follows when the noise finally runs out. By midsummer, the rhythm of my life no longer included her. We still lived under the same roof, but in different worlds. She filled hers with movement, new classes, new outfits, new versions of herself that flickered and faded like filters on a screen. I filled mine with purpose, running, working, designing. The silence between us wasn't painful anymore. It was necessary. One morning, I caught her standing by the mirror, adjusting her hair. She looked beautiful, but it was the beauty of someone performing, not living. She said she was meeting friends for brunch, asked if I wanted to come. I told her I had a site visit. She smiled in that polite, almost formal way people do when they already know the answer. As she walked out, I noticed she'd left her phone on the counter. It buzzed once, a message from Ryan. Just words, take care. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. That day, I finalized my resignation from the firm. Not out of defeat, but clarity. The new project had been approved, and I decided to start my own practice, smaller, focused, quiet. It felt right. The Tesla's dashboard reflected the skyline as I drove home that evening, the city glowing in the glass like a place I finally belonged to again. Claire was on the porch when I arrived. She looked tired, older somehow, but softer. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said not yet. She nodded, maybe relieved, maybe resigned. I went inside, made coffee, and watched her through the window as she scrolled her phone under the fading sun. For years, I'd thought love meant fixing what was broken. Now I understood it sometimes means walking away before you break too. That night, I packed a few things: sketchbooks, running shoes, one suit. No drama. No announcement. Just quiet organization. Tomorrow, I'd move into a short-term rental closer to the river. She'd wake up and notice, eventually. But by then, I'd already be gone, driving through dawn, coffee in hand, no destination except forward. It wasn't escape. It was evolution. The morning I left, the house was still. I made coffee, folded my running clothes into a small duffel, and placed my keys on the kitchen counter beside a note that said nothing except thank you. It wasn't a goodbye. It was closure disguised as politeness. The air smelled like her candles, lavender and vanilla, soft reminders of a version of us that no longer existed. I drove through the quiet streets as the city woke up, Spotify playing low, the same playlist I'd used on my early runs. Every turn felt lighter. I stopped by Dunkin', ordered my usual, and sat in the car for a moment before heading to the riverfront apartment I'd rented for a few months. It was smaller, simpler, the kind of place you could breathe in without memories pressing against you. That first night alone, I unpacked just enough to feel grounded. Laptop on the table, sketchbook open, plans spread out like possibilities. I watched the city lights ripple over the water and realized how much noise I'd been carrying. Arguments that never happened, apologies that never came. Now there was only space. Claire called once. I didn't answer. Then she texted, "I didn't think you'd actually go." I read it twice and turned off the phone. She had wanted proof that she could still make someone feel something. I wasn't going to give her that anymore. The next few weeks were quiet but full. My new firm started taking shape. 2 partners, a small office, clients who wanted something real. Every morning, I ran before sunrise, drank my coffee in peace, and watched emails fill my inbox with purpose instead of pressure. Then, one evening, I saw her name again. An email, subject line, dinner? I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. The message was short. She said she'd been thinking about me, that things hadn't gone the way she expected, that she missed us. There was no mention of love, just nostalgia, a reach backward. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed my laptop and went for a run. Some conversations are better answered with distance. Autumn arrived quietly, the way endings always do. The leaves turned slow along the river, and for the first time in years, I noticed how beautiful decay could look when you stop resisting it. My business was growing, the kind of steady progress that didn't need celebration. Clients liked the simplicity, the clarity. "You design calm," one of them said. Maybe that's what I'd been chasing all along. Claire reached out again, not with apologies, but with memories. She sent old photos from when we were first married. A camping trip, a dinner party, the morning we signed the mortgage. Her message said only, "We had good years." I agreed, silently. We did. But good doesn't always mean forever. One evening, I stopped by Whole Foods after work. I was picking up dinner when I saw her again, near the bakery section this time. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. She turned, saw me, and froze. Then she smiled that polite, careful smile people give when they're unsure if they're forgiven. She said I looked well. I told her I was. She said the house felt empty without me. I said emptiness has its own kind of peace. She didn't argue. We stood there for a moment surrounded by the soft hum of grocery store music, 2 people who once shared everything, now strangers making small talk over loaves of bread. Before she left, she said, "I didn't think silence could be this loud." I didn't answer. Some truths echo better without words. That night, I ran longer than usual. The city lights blurred in my vision, and I realized I wasn't running from her anymore. I was running towards something else. Maybe freedom, maybe acceptance. I didn't need to define it. When I got home, I checked my email. Another message from her. "You were right. We were both architects of the distance." For the first time, I smiled reading her words. It wasn't closure. It was acknowledgement, the quiet kind that doesn't fix the past, but finally stops fighting it. The next morning, I deleted the message and opened new design plans. The future was waiting, clean and silent. Winter came back, the same way it had started, quietly, without warning. Snow covered the city in a thin, forgiving silence. A year had passed since I'd left the house, since I'd stopped being the version of myself that waited to be chosen. Life had rebuilt itself slowly, one steady line at a time. My firm was thriving, my mornings disciplined, my peace unshakable. The noise was gone. Sometimes I'd see her name flash across my phone. A missed call, a text that said nothing new. Hope you're doing well. Saw your article in the magazine. Polite echoes of something that used to mean everything. I never replied. Not out of bitterness, but balance. Some chapters end not because you close them, but because they finally run out of words. One evening, after a late client meeting, I parked the car by the river where I'd first started running. The city lights shimmered on the water, and for a second, I thought about how easily people confuse stillness with loss. The truth was, silence isn't empty. It's full of decisions you've already made. Claire once said, "We're not teenagers anymore." She meant we couldn't live on passion alone. But what she never understood was that love isn't about chasing youth. It's about growth that doesn't need to be admired to exist. She chased mirrors. I built foundations. And in the end, that was the difference. The wind cut through the air, sharp but clean. I sipped my coffee, the same Duncan ritual that had quietly followed me through everything, and smiled at the thought that I'd finally learned the value of quiet victories. Not the kind that need witnesses, the kind that stay private, steady, unshaken. Somewhere in that same city, she was probably still trying to rewind time, trying to find the version of herself that once felt seen. But I was past reflection. I was forward motion. When I got home, the lights from my studio glowed soft against the glass. My designs waited, structures made of light, symmetry, and silence. She had wanted youth. I had chosen peace. And in the end, that's how I learned. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means arrival. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.